Notre Dame's latest commitment proves once again that the Irish are a recruiting power.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into the Portal Podcast, where you get your daily recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal scoop. I'm your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets with their first $5 bet being a winner. Today, we're going to discuss how Notre Dame has become a true national recruiting power. They gained the commitment of Elijah Golden, how he is a microcosm of what is transformed under Marcus Freeman and his entire coaching staff, back office staff, recruiting staff, strength staff, you name it, how they have worked together to elevate the roster across the board, especially at defensive line, a spot that historically Notre Dame does not recruit as well as some of their peers, let's just say, the LSUs, the USCs, Texas, Floridas. They've changed that. We're going to break that down in a little bit. We're also going to talk about their culture. This is one of the things that I think you can bring up in terms of the entirety of the program. Recruiting, position groups, the ability to keep players on their roster, all of it. Notre Dame's culture is important, and it was important with Elijah Golden as well. We'll discuss that. And we're also going to compare Notre Dame from a perspective of who are they recruiting against and who are they beating? How are they moving into the truly elite tier? Why is that? All of that starting right now with Elijah Golden himself. He plays at Cardinal Mooney High School in Sarasota, Florida, 6'4", 275 pounds. This is a young man that was originally at IMG when I met him, and he had told me that his schools that he'd kind of followed growing up, even though he was from Virginia originally, were Michigan and Notre Dame. The Irish end up winning out. Oftentimes kids have a program or two or three that they really like growing up, and they don't even make the final group. So at least one of those two did. And the other finalists were Virginia Tech, home state school originally. Again, he is from the state of Virginia prior to moving to Florida. And he also looked at Oklahoma, which has done a tremendous job of recruiting defensive linemen of late. And then Alabama. I think that's kind of self-explanatory in terms of recruiting acumen. It's the most dominant program over the last 15 years on the recruiting trail. So let's talk about Elijah Golden's game. There are several things that I like, a couple areas that I believe he needs to improve before he becomes a quote unquote true playmaker at the college level. But the physical gifts are certainly there. Let's start with the frame. When you see Elijah and you watch him move, the first thing that you notice is that for a big man, his first step is really impressive. Now, he stands up too much, plays too high. That is my biggest complaint. I'll get into that. But you can fix your leverage. You cannot create natural twitch. It's just what he has. His ability to shoot out of his three-point stance and engage and defeat the guy in front of him is really, really good. It's why we were excited about him. We saw him a couple of years ago at IMG. A bunch of us were at an event and we see this kid walk out. We're like, hey, who's this guy? And everybody interviewed him. He just looked the part. He was 240, something like that at the time. It's a couple of years later. He's much bigger now, much stronger. And he's also, just to fully note, he lists himself at 275 on his X profile. When I spoke to him in February at the Under Armour event, he was about 255, but he'd been wrestling. So his hand technique, his athleticism, his flexibility, his ability to use his hands, all those things will improve. Wrestling really helps with the game of football. So I'm curious if he is just 275 now or if that's just a generic term, but that's what he's got himself listed at. But again, the frame, the explosiveness, that's all there. And he's got long arms too. Once he learns to truly use not just a couple of moves, like he's a spin move and a swipe guy. Like he wants to get to the outside of you and shoot the gap. He'll occasionally use a power two-hand move and just take a player and move him back. But more often than not, he's a pretty high-risk guy with the swim move. And you can get smoked if you use that too much and play high. He does that at the college level. He'll definitely lose a lot of reps. But again, the difference between high school and college is massive. Notre Dame's got good defensive line coaches, Coach Wash, Coach Seabass, all those guys. They'll work with him. The point is still the same. He has the traits you cannot teach. Far as his ability to get better, I think it's just the basics. Don't overdo it here. Got to play lower. He's got to play a lot lower consistently. Secondarily, just add the moves. There is nothing glaring. It's just continue to get better, continue to work hard, and add to your arsenal. If he does that, this is a guy that could play in the NFL. Athletically, again, cannot teach the gifts. 6'4", 275, athletic and explosive. There's a place for you. Absolutely. He could be a player that moves in and out of different positions, and that's the next part here. I think that Elijah Golden will be a 3-tech most of the time. He plays some nose guard for Cardinal Mooney. It's a lower level program in the state of Florida in terms of classification. It's not a real big school, but Jared Clark, ironically, his head coach, played at Notre Dame. He was a quarterback recruit, then ended up playing tight end. He knows what it looks like, and he probably wouldn't have given the advice, hey, you can make it at Notre Dame, because he went there too. I imagine that the transition will be pretty good, but 3-tech is my guess. Possibly play some strong side end at some point in his career, maybe early on. I could see that. And then finally, depending on which front they're using, he could be a nose guard, especially on long yardage situations. The guy that's snapping the balls at a disadvantage against a really quick interior pass rusher. That's a possibility for him as well. In terms of what I expect weight-wise long-term, 285, 290. I don't think he needs to add a ton of weight. He could play at 300, but I don't think he's going to be the bowling ball, the big, thick, two-gap guy in the middle that gets up over 300 pounds. Allow him just to be athletic, play to his strengths, and that's using his quickness, especially his first step quickness. That's the kind of thing that I think Elijah will do best at Notre Dame and create havoc. One gap scheme, get up the field and go, which Notre Dame runs. They do it out of a 4-man and a 3-man front. And again, I don't think it really matters, but if they're in a 3-man front, could he play 2-eye or 4-eye? Sure. He could absolutely do that, but he's going to do better with a 1-gap mentality. Just get up and go. When he does that, it's really hard to block him. When we come back, we're going to talk about Notre Dame's defensive line recruiting class and kind of compare it like to Georgia, to LSU, and some of these other programs. Why is Notre Dame truly in elite recruiting power? The D-line recruiting is the final step, and we're going to talk about that next here on the Portal Podcast. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. If you want to get in on all the action with college football right now, you certainly have over-unders. Last I saw, Notre Dame was 10.5 wins. You can go into the Heisman odds and so many other different kinds of player props in terms of yardage, in terms of catches, or anything else that you imagine for a receiver. FanDuel will have an opportunity for you to check out. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets. Just open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you once again for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. If you use Apple, please turn on the automatic downloads. It makes it easier for you, and it's great for the algorithm for us. We truly appreciate it, and we're available across all the platforms: Podbean, Apple, Spotify, of course on YouTube, and just about any other place you can imagine you get your podcasts. Now let's talk a little bit about recruiting from a national perspective and how Elijah Golden fills into that for Notre Dame. He is their 4th defensive line recruit. Tiki Hola, another defensive lineman out of Bastrop, Texas. They also have a couple of kids from the state of North Carolina. South Garner, Ebenezer Iwatade. He is a guy that has got just incredible upside. A little raw, but 6'4", 220. Iwatade is just so gifted athletically. Once he fills out, watch out. And then for Myers Park in the Charlotte area, you got Rodney Dunham. This is a kid that's a little more filled out than Iwatade, but they're similar players. I don't think it matters which one would play strong side or weak side. They can both bend the edge and be defensive ends. They're both 6'4", 220 to 230 range athletes. Notre Dame does not normally get guys like that in general. And then you get Hola, who's 6'3", 6'2", somewhere in that, 300, 305 pounds. True earth mover, a guy that could two-gap, and you put Golden next to him, an athlete. And that's just for the 26 class. Their 25 class, I went and looked at it again. I'd forgotten they'd signed 5 guys last year. A couple of really big guys. I got Davion Dixon, who enrolled at just over 300 pounds at Notre Dame. He's out of Miami Palmetto. He looked pretty good in some of their videos. Chris Burgess, I loved his film. I thought he was a guy that might be in and up in the top 50 in the rankings last year. Now, he's a Chicago kid, but they don't normally get Chicago Simeon players. Good for Notre Dame for getting him. He could have went to any school in the country. Joe Reif, another kid from the Chicago area out of Elmhurst, York High School, probably a long-term guy, but length, 6'5", 258. Gordy Solstead, kid out of St. Xavier, a prominent program. For those of you who remember, like me, that's where Rocky Boyman, who played at Notre Dame, he was from there. He's been a commentator on ESPN and some other places, 6'5", 260. And then they got Dominic Hewlett, another kid from Illinois, but can probably play that edge position, 6'4", 240, 245. He's a kid out of Immaculate Conception High School in Illinois, really balanced. They did it 2 years in a row. And when you have balanced D-line recruiting, it just makes it easier. And what do I mean by that? Not just top talent, not just height, not just weight, but guys that can play all the positions. If you take their 2 classes together, this is what elite teams like Georgia and Bama have done over the last 10, 15 years. If you look at a 2-year window at D-line, let's just use that as the barometer since that's what Elijah Golden plays. You could have a pass rusher, a true weak side end. You got a 3-tech, you've got a nose guard, you got a strong side end. And in the case of like Bama and Georgia, which they've run a lot of 3-man line, they've got that pure nose guard in their systems. Notre Dame could even do that because they could put Davion Dixon there. They have a very balanced recruiting class. Now, they don't have Elijah Griffin, which was a kid that just signed this past year with Georgia. He might have been the best player in the country last year. He was unbelievable at the Under Armour event that I saw in early June. Like, he was just insane. I thought he was the best player there. I think even though Georgia has an incredible war chest of gifts along their D-line front, at some point Griffin's going to play this year. He's that good. You don't see freshmen play much for Kirby's team, but this is a little different. He's a top 10 pick in 3 years. That's what he is. That's the only thing missing from Notre Dame's defensive line recruiting and recruiting overall. They've even gotten to the point now they're getting top receivers too. And you could argue they're not getting like the number 1 receiver, but they've gotten enough top guys and they got 5. They picked up their 5th wide receiver commitment. They've kind of conquered all their beasts except for just the 5-star, no doubt about it, defensive tackle. And I'll just be blunt. Barring something changing, that's not going to happen because the vast majority of those kids, or at least somebody in their camp, want upfront big money to sign. That's not what Notre Dame normally normally does. Now, there are some exceptions to that, but for the most part, they just don't. Clemson, Georgia, LSU, Bama, Texas, those programs do really well. And some will say, well, how's Clemson doing it? I don't know because they don't pay as much in general with NIL, but they're getting a lot of local kids and a lot of kids that are very religious that kind of fit Dabo and they just don't want to go far from home. Location's Clemson's biggest friend in D-line recruiting. They recruit South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Florida, Georgia, a little bit in Alabama. They just take local kids pretty much. But everybody else, like they'll recruit a little more national and they get a lot of the local kids from the Georgia, Alabama area too. And it's a lot of upfront money, $1 million and up for those D tackles. So do I think Notre Dame's going to get those kids? Not necessarily, but that's where the second part of this comes in. And I'll go into this further in the third segment of the show. I didn't realize it was to this level until I dug into the numbers today. And that's why you got to do your research. Notre Dame's ability to sign good D linemen is one thing. Their ability to create good players from a basic molded piece of clay that's just got some basic technique, got some basic athletic gifts, etc., that they saw on film in high school. Maybe they were dominant at their level, but you don't know how it's going to go at the college level. Notre Dame's taken guys that were linebackers and made it work. Notre Dame has taken guys that were D ends and made it work at D tackle. They have transformed it. And I think that sells. It's why a lot of guys wait till their junior, senior, 5th year, and in Jordan Botelho's case, 6th-year senior to stay with the program. Notre Dame's culture is the reason, in my opinion, above all else, that they are a national recruiting power. It's one thing to sign players. It is another to keep them on your campus and producing because they actually want to be there. You could argue Notre Dame's culture is the best in the country. I don't know how you rank that, but they're somewhere in the top 5, I would assume. The schools that I have are Penn State, Clemson, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Illinois. Illinois is the one's probably the biggest outlier in that, but they're winning and they're pushing for the top 10 without signing hardly any top 250 kids. Their culture is incredible. But Notre Dame, they're getting some of those guys in addition to that. And I think that's how you can win a title. I think Illinois could make the playoff. I don't think they're going anywhere. But Notre Dame's culture keeps kids on campus. And we'll go over that here in just a second. But I want you to think about it. If you follow recruiting at all, and let's talk about Georgia. We'll use them as an example. They've got 8 guys committed in this class that are D linemen. And last year they got 5. They got 13. The vast majority of these kids are pretty darn good. But do we really think in a 2-year span that Georgia's going to keep all those guys? In my opinion, and I have no reason to even try to go into this, I'm never going to find it out. This is private meetings at UGA. They think they're going to have some attrition for A, somebody's going to turn pro, which that's inevitable. And B, there's just going to be attrition because that's college football. But I don't think they care as much. I think Notre Dame really wants to keep guys. They don't lose many transfers. It's a different philosophy. And Georgia might even encourage some guys sometimes if they don't fit, because Kirby's really picky about what he wants. I don't blame him. I would be the same way. You have to run that defense, especially with the 3-man fronts, the 2-gapping a certain way, or your linebackers get engulfed and you have no chance. So I get it. But I don't think their culture is built in the same manner. I don't think it's intended to do the same thing. And it's fine. You can still get there either way. It's good either direction. But they've taken 13 players in 2 years on the D-line. They run a 3-man front with a stand-up backer that gets after it a lot of the time, and then sometimes they put their hand in the dirt. They mix it up a little bit. But overall, they take a lot of big-body guys, and the ones that don't make it, they're gone. I think Notre Dame's culture is to why they're to a point they're going to win big and have a chance to be not just a playoff contender each year. It will be very surprising and disappointing for many Notre Dame folks if the Irish aren't at least a 1-game winner in the playoff at minimum each and every year, which is a very high standard. But of course, they need to win a title too. This is how you do it. I'll go over their depth chart here in just a moment, but Notre Dame is a recruiting power because they're getting talent, they're developing it, and it's staying. We're going to talk about that next. So when you look at the Notre Dame depth chart, it's proven. That is coming up next here on the Portal Podcast. Notre Dame's defensive line depth chart is shocking. It's not just the amount of talent they have, it's how the players got to the spots that they're in compared to where they started. Let me give you an example. The most recent change to their defensive line, and I count just for the full record here, their outside linebacker / hybrid spot, kind of like Georgia and some of these other schools have. It's a stand-up position part of the time hand in the dirt. They run a 3 and a 4-man front. That spot now has Preston Zinter there. He was a kid that could have been an H-back, or he could have been a linebacker out of high school. I don't think I spoke to anybody that believed he was going to be a pass rusher. Well, now he is. Notre Dame sees it a little bit differently. Not the tallest guy, he's maybe 6'2", but he's pretty athletic, pretty strong. He's been good on special teams. Just didn't have a way to get on the field as a linebacker because they're loaded. They move him to the edge. Most guys like him would have said, the heck with it, and transfer. He's from the greater Boston area, if I remember correctly. He's from the Northeast. Maybe he goes to BC. Maybe he goes to Syracuse. Maybe he goes to Pitt. I don't know. And played. Notre Dame's culture kept him there. That's the biggest part of their recruiting again. It's one thing to sign them. It's another thing to keep them and watch them excel in your program. Now, let's just go over some of the numbers here and just kind of look at it from a perspective of what Notre Dame has on their D-line. And I study other programs more than Notre Dame in terms of D-line recruiting. I'll admit that. But that's why I kind of dug into this, and it's interesting. And I'll just go through it with some numbers from Pro Football Focus on like total snaps, etc., and just what I know of these guys from watching them a little bit and seeing Notre Dame. But here we go. Let's start at defensive tackle. They got Jason Onye and Gabriel Rubio at D tackle this year, projected starters, and that could change. They're going to play a lot of guys. Maybe it's Heinisch, maybe it's Jared Dawson. There are 4 guys pretty much in contention to play a lot, but there isn't a superstar. Last year they had Cross and Mills, 2 guys that had NFL aspirations, legitimate. This year I think Dawson could. I don't know if anybody else will. Onye maybe would be my guess. There's been a lot of guys banged up, but they persevered. Rubio was banged up a bunch last year. He only played in 5 games, or excuse me, Onye only played in 5 games, 106 snaps. Rubio, 8 games, 181 snaps. They've both come over to Notre Dame's side of just persevering. Like a lot of teenagers, they have no idea what that really means. Notre Dame's culture has helped them in that. They could have went somewhere else and played for sure. Instead, they see Notre Dame get a transfer in Jared Dawson. They don't leave. They stick it out. They're competing for playing time. That culture has to be pretty strong. And then the other guy that I know Notre Dame fans don't talk about him much. He's not spectacular, but he is Mr. Consistency. That's Donovan Heinisch, his brother. Played at Notre Dame prior to him, also an interior defensive lineman. He had 349 snaps last year. He's a redshirt junior. All these guys just continually come back. Jared Dawson last year at Louisville had 294 snaps. So you got those guys. And then you have Armel Mukin. He's a kid that only played like 6 games at some prep school or something in Virginia. He's originally from Canada. Another guy that was just a molded piece of clay. He's massive. He's over 300 pounds now, but he was like 260 coming out of high school, something like that. He's a redshirt sophomore. He only played 60 snaps last year. He's now making moves and starting to get in contention for playing time as well. Is it perfect? No, because again, they don't have that elite, no doubt about it, stud defensive tackle until otherwise proven. They've got productivity, but nobody that I just say, that guy's going to be a game wrecker. They do have size. They do have guys that play for each other. They've got commitment to Notre Dame and they want to be there. Will that be enough to make a title run this year? I need to see it. It's the biggest question mark in my opinion, but that's certainly a really good place to start. And then on the edges, they're loaded. Boubacar Traore, probably the most gifted defensive player they have in their front 7 in terms of just rushing the passer, 240, 250, somewhere in that range. Coming off a knee injury last year, only played 133 snaps, but he's a redshirt sophomore. He might be done after this year. He's an NFL talent. Junior Tuli Alamaka, a lot of guys would have left. He's been banged up before, but he's been pretty consistent when he does play. Another guy came in as a linebacker. They moved him down. I didn't see it, but he's been pretty effective. And you can ask Georgia. He's the one that had the strip sack fumble that created the play that saw Notre Dame more or less take the edge away from Georgia and win that game. He's a good player. And then at the other spot, you got Bryce Young. Of course, his dad's Bryant Young, special talent. He's 6'7", 270 some pounds. That's a future first-round pick, probably a 3-and-out guy as well. Only a sophomore, and even though he was a late bloomer, he was borderline 5-star by the end of the process, and he was nobody after his sophomore year, like really late bloomer. This is the kind of player that can change games and help those interior guys that are juniors, senior, fifth-year seniors. And they also have Joshua Burnham. A lot of guys would leave because Bryce Young's coming up and taking some of your reps. He stayed. He's a redshirt junior at Notre Dame. And last year, Burnham had 467 snaps. I don't think he'll play as many this year as Young, by the second half of the season, had really taken a big step forward in the program. And he was at like 374 snaps. So they both played a lot. And then on top of that, you're still not done because they've got those guys and they have young players coming up as well. I don't know exactly what role they're going to use him in. But if you look at Notre Dame's depth chart, another guy that's kind of intriguing is Logan Thomas. He played a little bit towards the end of last year. He's a redshirt freshman, very explosive athlete. He's a little thin. He's 6'4", like 230. But again, and you have Zenter. They've got all these guys that have kind of stuck it out. And then they're trying to, adding Chris Burgess and some of these players into the lineup. Maybe they'll play before the end of the year too. But overall, Notre Dame's culture is incredible because they have so many guys that could have left, and a lot of programs would have lost them, and they stuck it out. They recruited them, maybe even not for the position they're in now. They've adjusted. They want to be at Notre Dame. That's a part of recruiting that I've started to look at far differently, and in some respects, didn't even acknowledge it to a certain degree. I've always talked about transfers, but Notre Dame's ability to keep elite talent is incredible. And by the way, I forgot to mention Elijah Hughes, a kid that transferred in from USC. Another kid took a shot on Notre Dame, wanted to see if he could make it there. He's a junior. He's got a couple of years left after playing at USC for 2 years. They're just deep with a lot of able-bodied players, and that culture is helping them get over the top. And I think it's the biggest part of why they're a recruiting machine. Even the kids that come in like these last 2 classes, they're not necessarily going to play right away, but they're willing to do it. And some of these guys are elite prospects, especially like Burnham, Iwatade. Those guys, those are dudes. They could have went to Georgia. They could have went to North Carolina. They could have went to Tennessee or Bama, etc. They decided to come up north, go to Notre Dame, even though they're both from North Carolina. This is a program now that I think will sign a top 10 class pretty much every year under Freeman. And depending on the year and the total number of commitments, they got a chance at top 5. The D-line recruiting was the final piece, and you got to give credit to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish for doing it. I didn't think that was going to be possible on a consistent basis, but they figured it out, and congrats to them for doing so. Thank you once again for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Truly appreciate you stopping in and go your latest recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal scoop. If you are on Apple, please make sure you click the automatic downloads to make sure you're informed as often as possible. We will see you again soon on the Portal Podcast.